Okay, so we want to finish off our browse view. We started working on it in our store controller. So we've connected to the database. Now the query we're going to write for this one is a little bit different. What we actually can do is we're going to query, we're still going to use our genres model. We don't need the list of genres, we only need the one. But because there's a relationship, if we look in our genre model, our genres has a collection or a list of albums. So if we just look up the selected genre, we can include the related albums along with it and pass that back to our view. So that's what we're going to do. So I'll just create my local variable. So I guess we'll make a comment. Instead of just calling the toList function, we don't need a list of the genres, but we do want it because there's a function here called include. This allows us to attach data from a related table in our query. It's kind of like the equivalent entity framework equivalent of doing a join in SQL. So we want to include any albums. But rather than getting a list, we only want to get one. We just want to get the selected genre. So we can do that by calling .single. So just look up that one record in our genre model. This is how we specify, and this is syntax we haven't used before. We'll spend a minute talking about it. I won't dive too deep into it, but you should see it and know the term. So this is where we write our where clause, right? We've passed in the name of the genre on our link. We want to look up just one. So when we call .single, Visual Studio is saying, okay, provide the query expression so we know which genre we want to look up. So we know we're going to need to pass in a couple things. We'll need to pass in the name, and we also have to specify, kind of like an SQL where clause, what column is that genre value related to. It's related to the name column in our table. So we're going to use a kind of shorthand for this, which is something you're going to see, probably you're going to see a lot more in the future as you're coding. It's what's known as, what it's looking for, just throw it into Google so we can have a look, is what's called a Lambda expression. Has anybody ever heard of a Lambda expression or ever used one before? Heard of them, used them, both. Okay, good. Now, this is probably not a very good explanation. This is, so it says an anonymous function mostly used to create delegates in LINQ. LINQ is the query syntax we're using with Entity Framework. Tom, you have a way of, could you explain in your own, what would you say a Lambda expression is? In simple terms. These. Okay, so it is a function that has no name, an anonymous function. We're used to working, you did this a lot in Tom's class, in your JavaScript class last semester. We'll do it a lot next semester with Node.js. We'll write anonymous functions every single week. So it's a function that has no name. I mean, here's what Microsoft says about them, and we can look at an example. It's basically a kind of shorthand code. So I want to create a variable called, say, myDelegate, where it's this value multiplied by itself. So rather than creating a function and giving that function a name and then writing the code, basically you can write the entire thing in one line where the function doesn't have a name. We just have some kind of input value that we can process. So in this case, the input value is called x. So it uses this syntax. So we have some kind of input value, and then we use this equals and greater than, and we perform some kind of operation with that value. I've yet to find a really good, clear, simple expression, a simple way of talking about it. When we do it in here, actually maybe make slightly more sense than the examples that Microsoft gives us. So what we want to say here is we'll create a variable called G to represent the current genre that's coming in. And this is our Lambda expression, equals greater than. And then we're going to tie our name, genre.name, to our genre variable that comes in. Actually, this is I better change this name because I already have a parameter called genre here. So I better call it something else here. I'll call this. Here's our Lambda expression. So our method accepts a string called genre. And we're basically writing a where clause. So we're looking up one genre record where the name is equal to the genre that comes into our function. It will take a while to get used to this syntax. I've been using it for a while. I'm still not used to it. So this should give us the one genre the user clicked on plus the related data in the albums table because they're connected by a foreign key. Every album has a genre ID. So we have a one-to-many relationship. So now we just want to take this data and pass it back to our view. So we're basically using the include instead of writing a SQL join, and we're writing this Lambda expression instead of writing a where clause. So this should give us the one record and then the child records that we want. And now we want to try and display this stuff on our browse view. So I think I have my browse view open here. So we're not displaying the list of genres anymore. We're displaying the albums. So I'm going to change this to say album list. Rather than making this an unordered list, we're going to build it as a table. So we're going to create a table, and we'll create a heading row with a couple of headings. First heading will be the album title. The second heading will be the album price. We can get rid of our view bag. I'll get rid of this loop as well, and we'll put in a different loop in a bit. So right now we just have this. So if we save and build, we should be able to load our browse page. We won't get any data on it yet. We just want to make sure what we've done doesn't crash. That when we call browse, our function successfully queries the database and doesn't throw an error. So we've built. So I'll go back to my main store page. Okay, so at least we've got a table showing up and we don't have the yellow error screen of death. That means our query worked. We just don't know whether we have any data or what our data looks like yet. So now we need to connect up our view to our controller. Well, sorry, I mean, it's connected, the controller loads it, but there's no data here. So we're gonna need to make a reference at the top. And then we're going to need a for each loop inside of our table. So we can go and show all those albums. And then maybe we should display the genre name up here. So we know what type of, we're confirming that we're showing the right kind of albums that the user clicked on. So up here, we'll declare our model. In this case, our model that we're getting back is actually not a list. So we don't need IEnumerable. We're not getting a list of genres, right? We're only getting one genre. So we just can use our week 12 models.genre here. We had on our index, we got back a list of type genre. This week, we're just getting one single record. So we don't want to declare that we're getting an IEnumerable, a list back. So now after our table row, we want to create down here before our table closes, this is where we want to put our for each loop. We're going to loop through. We're going to just create a variable called album. And you notice, because our query, our genre query included the albums, we have access to the albums list here. So we're not looping through the model itself. Our model is not a list. Our model is only one thing. But that model contains a list called albums. So inside of our loop, let's create a new row. And let's create 2 columns. And in here, we'll output so here's our title. And in our second column, we'll output the album.price. Let's see how that works. So now we've got our classical albums. We've got our rock albums. We also should do a couple other things. We should want to display the name of the genre at the top, and we should probably format these as currency. Well, that shouldn't be hard to do. How would we display the name of the genre somewhere in the title? How could we print out the name of the style of music the user clicked on? And maybe where would it make sense to put it? Okay. No, because we don't have a loop. It's only a single value. Well, if we do model dot, you're right, Brett. We're going to display the name, right? Because the model for this page is one single genre record. And that one record has a name property. And in fact, we could probably, let's try that. See if it shows up. So there's our genre name. If I pick a different genre, comes up. We could probably even print here the number of albums in the list. How do you think we would do it? How could we access the number of elements? Well, it's already shown on the page. So inside the H3, we want to display how many albums are in the list. Yeah, so we're going to work with model.albums dot what property, look through this list and see if you can find one that you think would give us the number of items. Yeah, the count. Yeah. Or like a length property in JavaScript of an array. I mean, when it's a C# list, we can use count. Anything that's IEnumerable, any list, count will tell you how many values are in it. So let's try that. So 12 jazz albums, 2 pop albums, 111 rock albums. So all of data is accessible but just by referencing our model. It's all here. We also want to format this as currency. So we can use a simple string format, basically the same thing we did on our grid view in Contoso when we formatted a date. We use the same function. So around this album.price, we'll call string.format and we'll supply a currency format. Actually, we used it for the department budget on our grid view in our Contoso University Web Forms application. So we can call string.format, and our format currency. So take the first value, format it as currency, And we can take out the @ symbol here because we're already inside our server-side tag. So take this value and format it. C means currency. We use this same function previously in our contoso.
So you replace C with like an N, would it just be numeric or something? Or?
Yeah, there's different string formats. D is, we could supply different date formats. The D would represent a certain date format, a small d or a capital D. So now we get currency. We get a $sign here. And again, our code, our syntax, it's really light. Because most of what a lot of the work is divided up. All the logic's in the controller and all the data handling is in the model. And now we're just rendering things that are, rendering pieces of information that are passed into our page. So one of the things we want to consider when we're accepting data in from a controller is, are we getting a list of data or are we getting a single object? Because that will determine whether our model is IEnumerable, it's a list, or whether it's just a single instance of an object. And some of these, we did a fair bit of new stuff today. So using things like include, using our Lambda expression for our where. The first time that we've done it. So it's all right that it looks strange. It should look strange. Everything we've done today is described in the week 12 slides. It's all here. And this is up on Blackboard in your week 12 folder. Okay, so you can see the review notes on this as well. Sorry? And you can watch the video as well. Okay. Does anybody have, not a problem, but at this point, a question? Anything that we should go over a bit more? Matt?
It doesn't matter if you don't give it a value, but I guess it's not overly an issue because the user would have to do it. They're always going through a link. So when we debugged it, it opened the browse without a value, so then it would throw an error.
Ah, okay.
Not that it's a big issue, but I guess there a way to.
Right. Or what would happen if they gave us a genre that didn't exist? Good question. Right, now it's throwing an error. Sequence contains no elements. Right, so our query, our dot single, we expected it would return one record. It didn't return anything. So then when we try to connect it up to albums, it bombs. Now, we did actually use a different version of single previously, and we could probably do this. Instead of single, we could try this. Right? We used this before when we ran a query. We could try single or default. So that might handle the instance where what we're searching for doesn't find anything. So what happens, so it says, if no such element exists, so it returns only the element that satisfies a certain condition or a default value. It's basically an empty object. So rather than, so now genre data shouldn't be, it shouldn't be nothing. It should be an existing object with nothing in it. But this may prevent that error if we use singular default.
The table should still show up as something.
Right, so we should get the table heading with no rows, I would hope, by using singular default. Let's see. So the issue now is our model is empty. So when we try to display the name, it dies because there is no name here. So we need to do some more handling, but it didn't crash in the controller, right? So using singular default on our query, it does prevent.
So if you took the name, then it probably would work. Actually, probably would have stopped an album.
Well, it would crash here too. So I have to think a bit more about how we should actually handle that. So we can use singular default, but we need some way of letting the page know that what we're sending back has no data in it.
I was thinking like in the case we could display a message saying you did not search anything, or you didn't select something.
Yeah, we could also probably check here. So for example, we could check the name attribute, and maybe rather than loading this view, we could have an if else. We could take them to an error page. Yeah, or we could take them back to the store page. That might be an option if we check what's in there. It's a good idea, good thought. Probably a good idea to use singular default. At least it's going to prevent the query from dying at this point if what they're searching for isn't found.
How would you check against the albums?
Well,
if it doesn't equal anything in there, then it goes.
Well, we could say something like if we could check if our name is empty, for example, else. Otherwise, return the view with the data. Wrap that in an else. That might work. So we're only going to load, but here we still need to return something else. So we could return view. So if we want to return the index view instead, so load index if we don't find a genre, either the genre is blank or they've given us a genre, they've changed the URL, we could try this and see if that might work. So we're returning a view in either way, but we're determining the lot, we're putting logic in the controller which view to load. Yeah, we could, but we maybe don't want them to get an error necessarily. Maybe we just want to take them back to the store page and have them click. Right, back.
You got someone that, like, someone gave them a broken link and the data's been removed, then it'll just go back to the...
Yeah, then we could take them back. So let's see what happens. I'll make sure I didn't break the original, that it's still working. So, you know, I can still load my blues albums. That's good. Okay, so checking it that way, I have to check it a different way.
The thing is, though, your genre name is not empty. You're passing as
Yes.
does not exist. So
Yeah, so that's,
you check the genre.album or something.
Yeah, you should check if that the name. Yeah.
I think I need to check if the object exists or not instead.
Yeah, then don't use the singular default.
So if
I think if you had that right, you already just made it single instead of singular default. I don't know. I thought it was right. Isn't the singular default making it into like a string that wouldn't be null?
It says it gives it a default value.
Yeah, so it's not a null value, a default value. So
Yeah.
it would be a null value if it was if you didn't even have the or default. I think.
Well, we need, yeah, so, but we need a way of checking if this is an empty object or not. Have to think about what the most efficient way for us to do that is.
When I get checking everything database.
Yeah, there used to be an is nothing function that's deprecated that would tell you if an object existed or didn't exist. So what could we check? I have to think about that one. It's a good question. There is an easy way for us to check. I wanted to think about what the best way to do it is.
So the last time you tested it probably would work if you didn't give it anything, like it was just
I don't know. I'll play around with it. We'll figure it. You have a suggestion? Mm-hmm. Oh, okay, try that.
The genre data is trying to come back, you need to check the album again. Data does album.
Yeah, we can try that. Although we could still have a genre that has no albums. We'll see. Not a bad suggestion. So let's see what happens. So I'm going to push my code up to Git. I'm going to stop my video stream. I remember I'm going to start. No, still. I need to find my replacement for the is nothing function. Because it doesn't let you evaluate. That's not the way we evaluate if the object exists. The object has to exist for that code to work. Exist, but with null values. I'll think about it. We'll look at it at the start of class next week. Okay. So part 2, remember, please, part 2 is due Monday night. If you haven't submitted part 1 of assignment 2, please submit by today, okay, because it is worth a quarter of the assignment. So next week, we'll carry on. We'll do a little more with our music store. Next week.